This is the Scandinavian defense. You've probably seen it many times by now. White opens e5, black responds d5, then white responds by taking d5, black responds by also taking d5, and then white responds with knight c3. This is one of the most common lines you'll see in the Scandinavian defense. We're going to go ahead and follow this line through. One of the things that black likes to do here is to put white in check. Now, this is a dubious move by black. A good Scandinavian player will probably not do this. But in the game I played, this is what happened. And at low levels, below 700 elo, you see this actually all the time. It's really common. Now, as white, of course, we have to get ourselves out of check. There's a bunch of ways to do it, and not all of them are good. The things you don't want to do, you don't want to use the knight you've already developed for getting yourself out of check. You could block here, you could block here, but you don't want to do either of those things. Those are both bad moves that set up a losing position for white. The other way to set up a losing position would be to block with your queen like that. That is also no good. Your best bets are to either use the king's bishop or the king's knight. You can block the king's knight like this, but the superior move of the two is to do what I actually did in the game, and that is to block with the bishop. Now black is basically left with a choice between developing knights or just attacking the pawn that was left vulnerable on g2 down here. The most common move for black in this case is to develop the knight to c6. The next most common move, and also the best move for black in this position, is to go ahead and move to g6 and attack that vulnerable pawn. But in the game I played, black made the third most common move, which is to move the knight to f6, just like that. The move I made in response was just to advance my pawn to d4 like this. This is actually the second best move available to white. The most common move made by white from this position is to just develop f3, and while that still creates a winning position, it is not the best move. The best move by far is knight to b5, because if you look what happens here, it puts your knight one move away from forking the queen, the king, and the rook. That's the whole family fork. Not a lot of people see that move according to the Lee chess data, myself included. I did not see it. I ended up taking the second best move, which, like I said, is d4. The idea here is that you're doing an aggressive pawn push so that you can attack the queen, and by the time you get your pawn up there, it's going to be protected by both your knight and your queen. So it's a pretty strong move, and it forces black into a response. Black doesn't have a lot of good moves available to them at this point. They can move their pawn up to g6 here, and that creates room for their bishop to develop. If they wanted to do that, they could. Even then, they still have a slightly losing position. The most common move for black is the one my opponent actually made, which is the knight here to c6. That is one of the worst moves they could make, but you can see the rationale there is they're just, hey, I'm going to go ahead and attack that pawn. But what they don't think about is that I can just go up there and now fork these two pieces at the same time as that pawn will be defended by this knight and my queen. And that is, a matter of fact, what I do. And now black finds himself in quite the pickle. Now we're two moves away from checkmate for white. In this position, black's most common response by far is to simply take that pawn like this. And then our response as white is then to take back that knight like this. And now you can see here that there's a pretty clear checkmate attack happening. If the knight comes down here, that's check, and the queen controls this whole file, leaving no place for the king to go. That's quite obviously checkmate. The three most common moves by black in this position are queen d6, bishop d7, and queen d7. Now, those three moves combined account for about 60% of all the moves that black will make in this position, and all of them do prevent the immediate checkmate. But the other 40% results in either checkmate or the loss of the queen. And not only that, one of those first three moves I just demonstrated also results in the loss of the queen. So let's look at those first. d7, where black defends against checkmate by closing off the file that the queen is on here. right? It creates an escape space for the king so that when we attack c7 with the knight, then there's no checkmate available, but we have forked the king, the queen, and the rook. And so, of course, like the good chess players we are, we simply take the queen, right? King has to go here, and then we go here. Now the king is in check again, and so what's likely to happen here is that the pawn just comes over and takes the knight, right? So we've basically sacrificed the knight in order to get the queen, and that sets up an opportunity for white to pretty much dominate the rest of the game, right? All right, so backing up to where we were evaluating black's moves in the face of checkmate, the first one we looked at was the bishop, and we decided that's probably not black's best move because they lose their queen. And so what they can do here instead, this is actually the most common move. It's less than 1 in 3 players that do this, but this one actually thwarts the checkmate attack. And so you need to know the right way to respond as white here. What you do is you actually just want to move your pawn up to defend the knight. And then from there, black is going to respond with e6. That's far and away, that's 2 out of every 3 players do this. They respond with e6, attacking your knight, and then you just come out with your bishop, develop it to f4, and now you've got this awkward situation set up here where your knight's being attacked, but their queen is being attacked. And so what are they going to do? They're going to go down. They're going to back the queen up to d7, and now you've got the typical fork that we see all the time, right? The bishop-supported fork where the king's in check, and now you're going to go over here and get the rook. And they have one of a couple of ways that they can get themselves out of check there. They're probably just going to move the king up like that, and then you're going to go over here and take the rook. And so I neglected to mention that one earlier. This is a situation where instead of getting checkmate or the queen, you actually just get the rook. Okay, backing up now, we'll return to the position where black defended the checkmate using the queen. And we'll go ahead and look at the other moves that are made here where black apparently does not see the checkmate. What happened in the game I played was the black knight developed to e5 like this. And that's clearly just not the right move, right? Because knight goes here, that's checkmate, right? All we have to do is jump in like that. Queen controls that whole file. It's checkmate. There's nothing you can really do from there. All right, so if we back up from here, that was just one of the moves that black has some non-trivial likelihood of making that results in checkmate. Another possibility is g6. That's a move black makes from this position that allows you to make the exact same checkmate attack. There's also, that's the one we just looked at. And then there's queen e4. That does nothing to prevent the checkmate. And then there's b6. Again, nothing to prevent the checkmate. There's a whole slew of these moves that account for either 3 to 6% each. And they combine to make up something like 40% of the moves that black makes from here. And then we already looked at the other 60% with those first 3. So there's a lot of checkmate attacks here. There's another one we should look at with the queen on e5. This one actually protects the c7 squares, so the knight can't quite just jump in there and get the checkmate. And so what you do is you develop the bishop out to here to f4, and that makes it kind of difficult for black at this point because they have to decide what to do with the queen, right? If you leave it there just to get taken, then the checkmate happens anyways. By far what black does in this position is actually just take that pawn down there because apparently they still don't see the checkmate threat. And so the queen still jumps in here, and that's still checkmate. So obviously you're not always going to be able to get into these checkmate traps where you win the game in 8 moves, but these sort of outcomes are fairly common against Scandinavian players who are somewhere around 800 elo or less. That's the level that I play at myself still, and I see these things pretty frequently. Most Scandinavian players at that level have to stop and calculate once they get to that third move where they put your king in check and you block with the bishop. They don't really have any theory beyond that, and so it makes these sort of traps quite a bit easier to find your way into, where you get early checkmates or you take a major piece like the queen or the rook. Let me know in the comments what other lines of the Scandinavian you are interested in. They of course don't all just go to e6 and put your king in check right at the beginning. There's several different moves that happen there that open up a bunch of different lines in the Scandinavian. I'd like to know which ones you see most often, or which ones you play if you're a Scandinavian player. And also, I'd like to have you as a subscriber. I'm a new chess streamer. I actually go live a couple of nights a week. I just play on chess.com. I stream here on YouTube, and I do sometimes play viewer games. I appreciate you sticking around for the whole video. I will see you soon.